Hi, friends. This is your pal, Scott Garibay. And today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And we're going to talk about the brilliant 2024 The Last Showgirl with Dave Bautista and, um, and Pamela Anderson. And today we're going to talk about how this film, first of all, spoilers for this film, how this film perfectly shows a dungeon master how to raise the stakes in a very subtle but shocking way, right? Okay. So basically, this movie is about the last showgirl. It's about a woman who's been a showgirl for 30 years on the Vegas Strip in a traditional showgirl show. I actually don't know what that means. I've never seen a showgirl show. So it was a little bit difficult to understand what they were even talking about. They're like, this thing is going away. I'm like, I never even saw that thing, so I don't know what, like what but Pamela Anderson and Dave Bautista did a great job. And I'm sorry I don't remember who played their daughter. Bog standard white girl to me. I mean, I've seen her in some other stuff, but I just can't remember who she is, and she hasn't done enough for her name to stick in my head. Sorry. So their daughter. So basically, this is about Pamela Anderson being the last showgirl, and for 30 years she has done everything possible to be the lead showgirl in a show called The Razzle Dazzle, right? And with that, she's been able to buy a house in Las Vegas. And she's been the star for 30 years, right? But now she's 57 years old, right? And she's done, and the show's done, and everything's shutting down. And now she has this very strained relationship with her daughter, and her daughter is about to graduate from college. So her daughter's like maybe 22, right? And and her daughter hates her, and the reason why is her daughter's like, you sacrificed a lot of my childhood. I sat in the, for like 5 years. She sat in the car in the parking lot with a Game Boy, for 2 shows a night. That was her childhood, right? So that her mom could dance nude, right, in the show, right? And she hates her for that. She's like, I'll never forgive you for this, because I really feel like a lot of my childhood was really screwed up, because I was working for you. I was working to make your dream. I was sacrificing my childhood to make your adulthood good, right? And I think that's kind of true, right? Like that's very true, right? But there's this point where Pamela Anderson, her show's shutting down, and the showrunner is Dave Bautista, right? And they explain that they had some history, right? And then she's trying to decide what to do next, right? Well, Dave Bautista is making good money, and he's going to be able to go on to the next show that they have. They're shutting down the Razzle Dazzle, but they're not shutting down the theater. They're going to put a new show in there. It's called The Circus, right? And he's going to be able to just transition right in, right? And because he's not 57 years old and needs to work, and needs to work without clothes on, his job is fine, right? Whereas hers isn't. Nobody wants a 57-year-old showgirl, right? Like, so that's the problem she has, right? And so her friend Jamie Lee Curtis is like, hey, just marry him, like bring him over, cook for him, and get married up, and then you're fine, right? And so she considers doing that, right? And so she sets up a date, right, where they're going to go to dinner together, right? And so they get together, and it's really awkward, right? Because she's like, hey, you look really nice. And he's like, oh, thank you, right? And she's like, do I look nice? And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even think to say that. And the reason why is, you have clothes on. I'm used to seeing you. I'm used to seeing all of you, right? And he doesn't say it, but he's like, what do I care if you have a dress on? You look worse, right? Like, and it's shockingly bad, right? And you could tell why she never made a relationship with him, right? Because he's not smart or socially adept, right? But then here's how they instantly raise the stakes, right? And he's like, hey, let's talk about your daughter, Hannah, right? And she's like, yeah, she's doing good, everything's going okay. And he's like, well, maybe you should have done a better job for her, right? Because it doesn't seem like she has everything she wants. And it seems like she's upset about how things went down. And Pamela Anderson says to Dave Bautista, well, what about you? You weren't even there at all, right? You gave her nothing, right? At least I was there for her, right? And he's like, yeah, you're right, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, Dave Bautista is Pamela Anderson's daughter's father. He's the father. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is so bad, right? Because first you were like, oh, wait, is the daughter right? Or did her mom give her everything she needed except, 5 hours a day, right? Like, and now she's a strong, independent woman. What's the question here? But then you're like, wait a second. Pamela Anderson divorced her father, air quotes, and he lives in New York, right? And so Pamela Anderson's daughter has lived in New York all these years with a family, with a mom and a dad who love her and care for her, right? And then also a half-sister, right? But dun, 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 her dad ain't her dad. Her dad ain't her dad. She's been lied to every single day of her life. She has nothing. She has a real father who despises her and never did the right thing and never showed up and never said he was the dad. And her real dad is sacrificing her as a fool, taking care of another dude's responsibility. That's a simp, right? Like, doesn't know it, doesn't know he's a simp, right? But he's a simp, right? Like, this fool didn't even know that, the woman he was with didn't care anything about him and used him for 25 years. Used him for 25 years. And I mean at the highest levels, right? Like, hey, this kid isn't yours, but why don't you take care of him? Why don't you take all the responsibility? And the guy that I laid with, he doesn't have to do anything because I actually like him. And he could do nothing, and I like him more than I like you. You fool. You ridiculous fool. Right? And that, you're like, whoa, man, this is so bad. Pamela Anderson is the villain, right? You're like, that's a villain. That is a straight up villain. And so is Dave Bautista. They wrecked this child, right? And this child has nothing. Has a dad who doesn't show up, and then a fake dad who is getting fooled and squeezed like an orange for all the juice that's in him. It's just terrible, right? But it also raises the stakes so fast, and you're like, and that, excuse me, that's how you do it in Dungeons and Dragons, right? If you're gonna drop a drama bomb, that's how you do it. You drop it so that it matters, right? If you're a dungeon master, you have to see this film, and this is how you craft and drop a drama bomb, in my humble opinion. Every single word you heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.